My name is Jonathan, 30 years old, living in a small town in the southern United States where the streets are shaded by oak trees and the rumble of buses fills the air every morning. I work as an IT employee for a software company, a stable job with a salary enough to live on and more if you know how to save. I'm not the type to show off. No parties, no designer clothes, not even the weekend trips my colleagues love to flaunt on Instagram. I take the bus, eat homemade boxed lunches, and save nearly every extra dollar I have. Not because I'm stingy, but because I have a dream. One day I'll have my own family, a home I can be proud of. I live with my parents in an old 2-story house in the suburbs. My mother, Clara, 58, loves watching cooking shows and constantly complains about the oven that broke last year. My father, Henry, 60, is a retired auto mechanic who now spends most of his time watching football or grumbling about the neighbors. They're not rich, but they're not struggling either. I'm an only child, and since graduating from college, I've naturally become the family's financial pillar. Electricity, water, internet, property taxes, maintenance. I cover it all. I don't complain. It's my responsibility, I think, and I want them to live comfortably. Every month, after paying all the bills, I set aside a portion into a savings account, consistently year after year. By now, the amount is close to $200,000. I haven't told anyone, not even my parents. It's my secret, the future I'm building day by day. Seeing the balance in my account gives me peace of mind. I thought it would stay a secret forever, until one day, everything changed. It was a Friday evening with light rain falling. I had just come home from work, exhausted after a day of fixing system bugs. Mom was in the kitchen, the smell of grilled meat wafting through the air. Dad was in the living room, eyes glued to the TV. I took off my shoes, about to head upstairs, when Mom called me back. "Jonathan, come here for a second." Her voice had something unusual, not the gentle tone I was used to. I walked into the kitchen and saw her holding a piece of paper, a bank statement. My heart skipped a beat. It was the statement for my savings account. How did she get it? I kept it in a locked drawer. "How did you know?" I asked, my voice dry. Mom shrugged, as if it were no big deal. "I was cleaning your room and noticed the drawer's lock was loose. I opened it and found this. You're hiding all that money and didn't say a word?" I wanted to get angry but held back. "That's the money I've saved. For the future," Mom smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. "What kind of future needs that much? Almost $200,000, Jonathan. Are you going to let your dad and me keep living miserably in this house?" I was stunned. Miserably? I pay every bill, buy groceries, fix the roof whenever it leaks. I didn't know how to respond, so I just took the paper back and went to my room. But that night I couldn't sleep. Something in Mom's voice made me uneasy, like a storm was brewing. In the days that followed, everything began to change. My parents were no longer the people I once knew. They started making demands little by little, as if my money belonged to everyone. It started with Mom. One morning, she pulled me to the dining table and placed a travel brochure in front of me. "A safari in Africa, Jonathan. I've dreamed of going since I was young. It's only $10,000. You can afford it, right?" I looked at her, searching for the woman who used to hug me when I got bad grades at school. $10,000 wasn't a small amount. It was months of savings, days of eating boxed lunches and taking the bus, but I thought, if this is their dream, I could sacrifice a little. They raised me, didn't they? "Okay, Mom," I said softly. "I'll pay for it." Mom hugged me, beaming. "My good boy." But the hug faded quickly like a passing breeze. My parents prepared for the trip with excitement. They bought new suitcases, new jackets, even a fancy camera, all with my money. I didn't say anything, just quietly transferred the funds. On the day they boarded the plane, I stood at the airport, waving goodbye. Mom smiled, Dad nodded, and I thought, they must be so happy. For the 2 weeks they were in Africa, I stayed home alone. The house was quiet, with only the hum of the old TV and the patter of rain on the porch. I ate instant noodles and drank tap water because that month's salary had gone to their trip. I didn't complain. I imagined them watching elephants, taking photos with Mount Kilimanjaro, and told myself I did the right thing. But when they returned, things weren't as I'd hoped. I went to the airport to pick them up, my heart eager. I thought they'd share stories, hug me, or at least bring back a small gift, a bracelet, a postcard, anything. But they walked out, dragging heavy suitcases, looking exhausted. Mom complained about the long flight. Dad grumbled about the airplane food. Not a word of thanks. Not a question about how I was. Not even a token gift. I hoped you guys had fun, I said, trying to keep my voice light as I drove home. Mom shrugged. It was okay. Dad said nothing, just scrolled through his phone. I felt my heart being squeezed. $10,000, 2 weeks of eating noodles, nights convincing myself I was doing the right thing, all for their indifference. But I swallowed my anger, telling myself they're probably tired. They'll thank me later, but they didn't. After the trip, my parents changed. They were no longer content with the old house and simple meals. They started demanding bit by bit, as if I were an ATM. One day, Dad called me to the living room and pointed at the old TV. This thing's too blurry. Buy a new one, Jonathan. $2,000 will get a good one. I wanted to say the TV still worked fine, that I'd already spent $10,000 on their trip. But Dad looked at me, his eyes hard. Don't you want us to live comfortably? Or are you stingy? I clenched my jaw and withdrew money from my savings. The new TV was delivered and Dad smiled, satisfied, but offered no thanks. Then it was Mom. She dragged me to a store, pointing at a $1,500 oven. The one at home is broken. Buy this, Jonathan. I need it to cook for you. I wanted to say I'd been eating boxed lunches for a year, that I didn't need fancy meals. But she tilted her head, her voice sweet yet challenging. Don't you want me to be happy? Or do you think I don't deserve it? I withdrew more money. The oven was installed in the kitchen, gleaming, but Mom used it only once. They didn't stop. A new leather sofa, $5,000. Clothes for Mom, shoes for Dad, home decorations. Each demand came with words that choked me. You have the money, don't you? If it weren't for us, would you be where you are today? Don't be selfish, Jonathan. I watched my savings account dwindle. The $200,000, my dream for the future, was now just shrinking numbers. Each withdrawal felt like a piece of me being taken away. But I kept doing it because I thought it was my duty. Because I was afraid they'd hate me if I refused. Then one day it went too far. Dad called me to the living room, his voice brimming with excitement. On the table was a brochure for a pickup truck priced at $40,000. Jonathan, I need this truck. The old car's done for. Buy it. I want to drive it next week. I looked at him, then at Mom, nodding in agreement. Anger flared in my chest, but I kept my voice calm. I can't afford a car right now. I've already paid for so much. Dad smirked, his eyes cold as steel. Don't lie. $200,000. You can easily afford it. Or do you want us to suffer? I shook my head, my voice trembling. I'm not buying it. That's the money I saved for my future. Mom shot up, pointing at my face. Your future? You're only thinking of yourself. If it weren't for us, would you be where you are today? I wanted to scream, to tell them I'd paid for everything, sacrificed every pleasure to provide for them. But I stayed silent, turned, and went to my room. The days that followed felt like living in an iron cage. My parents stopped talking to me, but their eyes were filled with resentment. I went to work, came home, and hid in my room, trying to avoid confrontations. But every time I passed through the living room, I saw the new TV, the gleaming oven, and I wondered, where did I go wrong? I started doubting myself. Was I being selfish? Was I ungrateful to my parents? I wanted to talk, to explain, but every time I opened my mouth, I was met with their cold stares. Then one evening, everything fell apart. I came home from work, exhausted after a long day. The house was dark, with only a glow from the living room. Dad was sitting there, a beer bottle in hand, his eyes bloodshot. Mom stood beside him, her face hard as stone. The air was heavy, like the calm before a storm. Jonathan, Dad said, his voice low but sharp as a blade. Who do you think you are, refusing your parents? You want to keep the money for yourself, don't you? I sighed, trying to stay calm. I'm not keeping it for myself. That's the money I saved. I've paid for everything in this house. The Africa trip, the TV, the sofa, the oven. I need a future. Dad slammed the beer bottle on the table, the sound of glass hitting wood making me flinch. A future? You wouldn't have a future without me. You think you're so great, don't you? Get out of my house now. I was stunned, as if I'd been slapped. What did you say? Mom cut in, her voice shrill. That's right. If you're not grateful, then get out, you selfish brat. You think paying a few bucks settles everything? I stood there looking at my parents, the people I once loved more than anything. My heart felt crushed. I wanted to cry, to scream, to ask why they were treating me like this. But I just turned silently, went to my room, grabbed a backpack, stuffed a few clothes inside, and left the house. That night, the air was freezing. I stood under a streetlight, my breath turning to mist. I didn't know where to go, only that I couldn't go back. I called Jack, my closest colleague. He answered immediately, his voice warm and steady. Come to my place, Jonathan. Don't think about anything else. I went to Jack's, sitting on his sofa, clutching a mug of hot coffee. I told him everything. About the Africa trip, the endless demands, the pickup truck, the bitter words. Jack listened without interrupting. When I stopped, my eyes stinging, he put a hand on my shoulder. Jonathan, he said firmly, you don't owe them your whole life. You've done more than enough. It's time to live for yourself. Jack's words were like a small flame in the darkness. I looked at him, and for the first time in days, I felt a spark of hope. For the first time, I felt a small fire ignite in my chest, not anger, but determination. Jack, I said, my voice hoarse, I'm going to stop paying for them. Electricity, water, internet, taxes, everything. I can't keep doing this. Jack nodded, patting my shoulder. That's right. They need to learn to manage on their own. You're not a money printer. The next morning, I called the utility companies. I canceled the automatic payments for the electricity, water, and internet bills. I contacted the tax office, informing them I was no longer responsible for the house. Each call was like a knife cutting through the invisible chains that had bound me for years. I was both scared and relieved. Scared because I knew my parents wouldn't let it go. Relieved because I was taking back my life. I stayed at Jack's, sleeping on his sofa, going to work as usual. I tried not to think about my parents, but every time my phone buzzed, my heart clenched. 3 days later, Mom called repeatedly, leaving dozens of voicemails. I opened one, her voice shrill and full of resentment. Jonathan, how dare you cut the electricity? The house is pitch black. I can't cook. Do you want me to starve? I turned off the phone, my hands shaking. I wanted to call back to apologize, but then I remembered her eyes when she told me to get out. I deleted the message. Dad sent a text, short but icy. You'll regret this, Jonathan. I'm your father. I read it, then locked my phone. I told myself, I'm not wrong. I can't live forever to please them. A week passed, and I started getting used to my new life. Jack was kind, letting me stay without prying. He talked about work, cracked jokes, made me laugh, something I'd almost forgotten how to do. I went to work, focused on a new project, and felt lighter. I started thinking about renting an apartment, starting over. But I knew my parents wouldn't let go easily. On the 10th day, things took a turn for the worse. I was at the office coding when my phone buzzed incessantly. Mom texted, You didn't pay the electricity. I had to borrow money from the neighbors. Are you satisfied now? Then Dad called, his voice a growl through the speaker. You think you can escape me? Just wait, Jonathan. I turned off my phone, trying to focus, but unease gnawed at me. That evening, Jack dragged me to a coffee shop near the office. He looked at me, his voice serious. Jonathan, you need to be ready. Your parents won't stop. They're used to relying on you. Now that you've cut them off, they're going to lose it. I nodded, but my heart was a mess. I know. But I can't go back. I just can't. Jack patted my shoulder. I'm here. You're not alone. I smiled, feeling like I'd found a brother. But I didn't expect that just a few days later things would spiral beyond control. It was a Monday, a normal day at the office. I sat at my desk, earphones playing music, trying to focus on my code. Colleagues around me chatted lively, the atmosphere light. I was starting to feel like I could get through this, that I could rebuild my life. Then I heard a commotion from the reception area, shouting, hurried footsteps. I pulled off my earphones and looked up. A colleague ran past, pale-faced. "Jonathan, someone's causing trouble out there. I think it's your dad." My heart stopped. I jumped up and rushed to the reception, and just as I feared, there was my dad, his face flushed red, his shirt wrinkled, pointing at the poor receptionist. "Get Jonathan out here, now!" "Dad!" I shouted, my voice trembling. "What are you doing here?" He turned, his eyes wild with rage. You dare cut off the house's money, leaving your mom in the dark, you ungrateful son!" People around started staring. My face burned with shame and anger. "Dad, calm down. Let's sit and talk." But he wouldn't listen. He stepped forward, jabbing a finger into my chest. "You think you're so great, huh? Cutting off electricity, water, leaving your parents to suffer, you'll pay for this." I tried to keep my voice steady. "I've paid for everything in that house for 10 years. I can't keep doing it. You and Mom need to manage on your own." He sneered, his voice venomous. "Manage? If it weren't for me, you'd be dead in the streets, you ungrateful brat." Before I could respond, Jack appeared, stepping between me and Dad. "Mr. Henry, calm down. This is a workplace. You can't cause a scene like this." Dad glared at Jack, his eyes bloodshot. "Who are you? His little friend, right? Teaching him to turn against his parents?" Jack kept his tone calm. "I just want you to relax. Jonathan hasn't done anything wrong. He has the right to live his own life." I'd never seen Dad so furious. His face turned purple, his fists clenched, and then, like a nightmare, he grabbed a vase from the reception desk, raised it high, and smashed it down on Jack's head. The sound of shattering glass echoed and Jack collapsed, blood streaming from his forehead. I screamed, rushing to catch Jack. "Jack! What did you do, Dad?" Colleagues around us panicked. Someone called security, another called the police. Dad stood there, panting, the broken vase at his feet. He looked at me without a trace of remorse. He deserved it. That's what you get for defying me. I didn't think. I called 911, my voice shaking. "Someone's been attacked at my company. Please come quickly." The police arrived within 10 minutes. They handcuffed Dad and led him to the patrol car. He didn't resist, just stared at me with pure hatred. "You'll regret this, Jonathan." That was the last thing he said before the police car drove away. Jack was taken to the hospital. Fortunately, the wound wasn't too deep, but he needed 6 stitches and would be off work for a few weeks. I sat by his hospital bed, gripping his hand, overwhelmed with guilt. "I'm so sorry, Jack. If I hadn't stayed at your place, if I hadn't told you about this..." Jack gave a weak smile, his face pale. "Don't be stupid, it's not your fault, your dad. He chose to do that." I nodded, but my heart was still heavy. I knew Dad would face consequences, but I never imagined things would go this far. That night, Mom called. Her voice was frantic, laced with anger. "Jonathan, why did you call the police on your dad? Do you want him in jail? You're an ungrateful son." I gripped the phone, trying to stay calm. "Mom, Dad hit Jack. He smashed a vase on his head. I couldn't let that slide." She sobbed, but it wasn't an apology. "You don't understand how stressed your dad is. You cut off our money, left us to suffer. This is your fault." I hung up, unwilling to hear more. For the first time, I realized my parents would never see themselves as wrong. They would always blame me, no matter what they did. In the days following the incident at the office, I lived like I was trapped in a waking nightmare. The image of Dad raising the vase, the sound of shattering glass, and the blood on Jack's forehead haunted me every night. I couldn't sleep, just lay on Jack's sofa, staring at the ceiling, wondering, how did things come to this? What did I do wrong to turn my parents into strangers? Jack was recovering slowly, but the scar on his forehead was a constant reminder of the price I had to pay. I visited the hospital every day, bringing coffee and sandwiches, trying to make amends even though Jack always brushed it off. I'm fine, Jonathan. Stop blaming yourself. Your dad chose to do that, not you. But I couldn't stop blaming myself. I thought about the years of paying bills, the Africa trip, the countless times I dipped into my savings to please them. I thought I'd tried my best, but why was it never enough for them? Then Mom called. My phone buzzed in the middle of the night, her name flashing on the screen. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the decline button, but I answered. Her voice wasn't shrill like before, it was trembling, full of tears. Jonathan, you have to save your dad. The police are holding him. They say he could go to jail. You're his son. You have to do something. I sat up, my heart pounding. Mom, Dad assaulted someone. Aggravated assault with a dangerous object is a criminal charge. There's nothing I can do. She stopped crying, her voice suddenly ice cold. You ungrateful child, do you want your parents to die? I don't have a son like you. I hung up, my hands shaking. Her words cut into my heart like a knife, but strangely I didn't cry. I just felt empty, like a part of me had died. I told myself I'm not wrong. I can't go back. A few days later, I got word from a lawyer. Dad was charged with assault, aggravated by the use of a dangerous object. The trial happened quickly. I didn't attend, but Jack urged me to keep up with it. You need to know the outcome, Jonathan, to close this chapter. Dad was sentenced to 2 years in prison. When I heard the news, I didn't feel joy or sadness, just a strange stillness. I thought I'd feel relieved, but I didn't. I only felt regret. Regret for a family that once had happy days, now broken beyond repair. Mom didn't call again after that conversation, but her actions spoke louder than words. One afternoon, I got a message from an old neighbor. Jonathan, your mom threw all your stuff out onto the lawn. Clothes, books, even your old computer. Come get it or they'll throw it all away. I borrowed Jack's car and drove to the house, my heart heavy. Under the fading light of sunset, my belongings were scattered across the grass. Wrinkled shirts, rain-soaked books, and the computer I used in college, its screen cracked and shattered. Mom stood at the door looking at me, her eyes devoid of emotion. Get out, Jonathan, I don't want to see you again. I wanted to ask why, to scream that I'd done everything for them, but I just silently picked up a few usable items, put them in the trunk, and drove away. As I left the familiar street, I glanced at the house in the rearview mirror, and for the first time I felt no regret. I knew I had lost them forever. In the weeks that followed, I tried to rebuild my life. I was still staying at Jack's, but I began searching for an apartment to rent. I went to work, focused on my job, and tried not to think about my parents. But every night I dreamed of Dad, saw his eyes as the police led him away. I wondered, did he regret anything? Or did he still think I was a traitor? Jack urged me to visit Dad. Not to make peace, but so you can move on. You need to face him, Jonathan. I hesitated. I was afraid to see Dad, afraid of what he'd say, but I knew Jack was right. If I didn't confront him, I'd be haunted forever. So one Saturday morning, I drove to the county jail where Dad was being held. The visiting room was cold, reeking of disinfectant. I sat behind the glass partition, hands clenched, waiting for Dad. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. He was thinner, his hair grayer, his eyes sunken. He sat down, staring at me through the glass, saying nothing. Dad, I started, my voice hoarse. I came to talk. I didn't want things to end up like this. He smirked, his voice cold as stone. Talk? You called the police on me, left your mom to suffer, and now you want to talk? You're an ungrateful son, Jonathan. His words hit me like a slap. I wanted to explain, to talk about the years I paid the bills, the Africa trip, how they kicked me out of the house. But I knew he wouldn't listen. Dad, I tried to do everything for the family, but I can't keep sacrificing my entire life. He leaned forward, his eyes burning with hatred. Sacrifice? You don't know what sacrifice is. I raised you, put you through school, and this is how you repay me? Get out, Jonathan. I don't have a son like you. I sat there, stunned. I'd braced myself, but his words still cut like a knife. I wanted to cry, to beg for his forgiveness, but then I thought of Jack, the belongings thrown onto the lawn, the blood on my friend's forehead. I stood up, looking at Dad one last time. Goodbye, Dad. I left the visiting room without looking back. When I stepped outside, the bright sunlight made me squint. I took a deep breath, feeling like a weight had been lifted from my chest. Dad had disowned me, but strangely, I didn't feel loss. I felt free. On the drive back, I called Jack. I just saw Dad. He told me to get out. Jack was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'm sorry, Jonathan, but you did the right thing. Now you can start over." I smiled for the first time in months. "Yeah, I think so." When I got back to Jack's place, I sat down, opened my laptop, and started searching for apartments. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready. My parents had chosen their path, and I would choose mine. After the day Dad disowned me in prison, I felt like a drifting boat, no longer tethered by an anchor. The old house, my parents, the years of sacrifice, all of it was now just a faint shadow in my memory. I stood at a crossroads. Let the pain drag me under, or stand up and live for myself. I chose the second path. I started by finding a place to call home. Jack helped me scour rental websites, and after a few weeks I found a small apartment near the office. It wasn't luxurious, a tiny living room, a cramped kitchen, and a window overlooking an alley full of greenery. But when I stepped inside, I felt something I'd never had before. Freedom. I signed the lease, my hand trembling with excitement. This was the first time I'd done something just for myself. Moving into the apartment was a strange experience. I didn't have much, just a few clothes, my laptop, and some books salvaged from the pile Mom threw onto the lawn. I bought a used bed, a desk, and a green sofa from a second-hand shop. Each item was a small step toward building a new life. I stood in the middle of the apartment, breathing in the smell of fresh paint, and smiled. For the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Jack came over to help me settle in, bringing a beer and his familiar grin. "Look at you, Jonathan, like a college kid just starting out." He laughed loudly, and I laughed too. That laughter was light, unforced, as if I was relearning how to live. Work became my anchor. I threw myself into projects, coding late into the night, and earned praise from my boss. Colleagues started inviting me to lunch, and I realized I was no longer quiet Jonathan. I shared stories, joked, and for the first time I felt like part of the world out there. I also began spending on myself, something I'd never dared to do. I bought a new jacket, not because I needed it, but because I liked it. I signed up for a weekend cooking class, learning to make the beef stew Mom used to cook. I even bought a ticket to a baseball game, sitting among the crowd, shouting myself hoarse when the home team scored. These small things brought me back to life, as if I was making up for the years of only saving and sacrificing. But it wasn't always easy. Some nights I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and memories flooded back. I remembered the evenings when Mom sang lullabies, when Dad taught me to fix a bike. I wondered if I'd given in, if I'd dropped the charges, would things have been different? But then I recalled Dad's eyes in prison, the broken belongings scattered on the lawn, and I knew I'd made the right choice. They didn't value me, and I couldn't live to please them forever. Jack was the one who pulled me out of those dark spirals. He invited me camping, to movies, or just to sit with a beer and talk about nonsense. One night, as we sat on my apartment's balcony looking at the city lights, Jack asked, "Do you regret it, Jonathan? Cutting off your parents?" I took a sip of beer, thinking. Sometimes I think I was too harsh, but then I realize if I hadn't done it, I'd still be their shadow. I don't regret it. Jack nodded, his eyes glinting. "You're stronger than I thought, and I'm proud of you." His words moved me. I realized that even though I'd lost my parents, I still had a friend, a brother who stood by me. And I knew I wasn't alone. My new life wasn't perfect. My savings account was down to half, and I had to start again from a smaller number. But I was no longer afraid. I had a job, an apartment, evenings free to listen to music or read. I still dreamed of a family of my own, but this time, I'd build it for myself, not for anyone else. One evening, I stood in front of the mirror looking at the 30-year-old man with new wrinkles on his forehead. I was no longer the Jonathan who ate instant noodles, paid bills, or bowed to his parents. I was Jonathan, living, breathing, and learning to love himself. I smiled at my reflection, and for the first time, I felt proud. Looking back on my journey, I've realized one thing. Family isn't a chain that binds you. It's a place where you find love and appreciation. I used to think family duty meant sacrificing everything. Time, money, dreams. I paid bills, funded the Africa trip, bought the TV, sofa, and oven, all because I thought that's how I proved I was a good son. But I was wrong. Duty doesn't mean losing yourself, especially when the people you love don't value you. My parents chose greed over family. They saw my money as their entitlement, my sacrifices as a given. They didn't thank me, didn't apologize, and when I said no, they turned their backs, kicked me out, and threw my belongings onto the lawn. My father chose violence, smashing a vase into Jack's head, and my mother chose to cut ties to protect him. They didn't see my worth, and I had to learn to accept that. Cutting off my parents was the hardest decision I've ever made. Some nights I wondered if I was too harsh, if I could have done things differently. But every time I look at my small apartment, at the things I bought myself, at the meals I cook, I know I made the right choice. I didn't abandon my family. I let go of people who didn't value me. And that's the difference. Life isn't an endless string of unconditional sacrifices. You have the right to prioritize yourself, to say no when someone crosses your boundaries. I've learned that to love others, you must first love yourself. I no longer live to please my parents, no longer carry the burden of their unreasonable demands. I live for me. For mornings waking up with hot coffee, for evenings listening to music, for the dream of a future I build myself. My story isn't about condemning family, but about reminding us that true family is where you're loved, not where you're used. If you're carrying a burden like I was, stop and ask yourself, you deserve to live for you. Don't be afraid to let go of toxic relationships, no matter who they are. You don't owe anyone your entire life.